All right. Good evening, everyone. We're starting to get things going here. See people still coming on in here, so I'll give it a second to the folks arrive on here. There's a poll while we do that. If you could please give a little answer on that poll, we would appreciate that. And we'll get started here real soon. Okay. So my name is Matt Kiesner. I'm an instructional designer here at Applerouth, an elite tutor. I helped write our writing curriculum in this, and so we'll be talking about how to become a stronger writer and a updated presentation. So we'll be talking about how tech has changed these sort of things. Um, there you go. Sorry. We have an agenda here. All kinds of stuff we'll be talking about. If you have any questions on the way, feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and I will get to them. And as always, this is our why. We change students' self-beliefs, you change their lives, and certainly that that has a lot of effect on writing. And the things we do academic tutoring, which is kind of what um, you would expect in this for writing. We also do test prep, SEC, ACT, other tests like that, AP exams, and executive function coaching, which admittedly writing is kind of a foot in each wing of both academic tutoring and also executive function because you had the planning of writing and the organization of writing and the putting time to write and knowing how long it will take is definitely I think an executive functioning as well. All right, so got a little story here is that, and to get a little into the backstory of this, is that there's a apocryphal possibly story that the reason that literacy became popular in the modern world was because of the Industrial Revolution. Was that the reading is a good skill to have if you work in a factory, if for nothing else that keeps people from getting hurt or breaking the machines, right? Of just being able to put signage and say, don't stick your hand in there, add oil every other day or whatever. And so that the outcome of that is a literate workforce, but there's not like the reason to have someone write in the same way, like that the production of writing is not like the same skill. And so I think you know there are a lot of students who have a deficit for that, because it's something that it's a different kind of skill set than being able to um, uh, understand new information versus like what we'll be talking about, which is like generating new content, expressing your own ideas. Um, and so that becomes a thing in high school where writing is not emphasized for a lot of it, and then a lot of students will hit kind of they'll have to take that freshman writing seminar, which I think is a useful class and that you should take it. But that's really the first time that I think for a lot of students that really writing instruction becomes part of their like the emphasis of a class. Obviously, there's making generalizations here. There's lots of different programs and everything, but you did show up for how to be a stronger writer. So making a few inferences here. But I'm not gonna like beat around the bush there. So like how do we view AI in this? Because obviously, like there's no denying that AI is a tool on the end. It is capable of writing um, of of some passable quality. Though I kind of wonder if as we kind of go into the world these days, um, do you notice when something is AI, like as AI written text? I feel like I have a real like it's very obvious to me. Um, a There's a local merchant that that describes products, and I don't want to get into the specifics of there, but the descriptions of the product and it's like you stuff. It like I could tell that they switched to AI because like suddenly everything is like this is the most amazing product and it has all these these uses and then you could tell it was this kind of that copy of that. And I think that a lot of us are kind of skeptical of that. So if I see especially online, a company using clearly AI generated images or text, I become skeptical of them, and I wonder, like, is this a scam? Is this stuff even real? And I think that's, that would be part of the discussion. And I don't think that, uh, you know, that all human writing is going to go away because of the machine, right? Um, so can AI do your homework for you? Sure. Um, is it going to do the homework well? Probably not. Is it going to give the same answer that to another student who's also in that same class? Yeah, that could happen as well, right? And so we have these, like, just because it is there, um, does not mean that it is uh, a catch-all there. And we're seeing that, in at least in college level, um, that they're getting around this where, like, they're going back to blue book. You have paper and a pencil, and you write your final exam, in the class. Or I had a student take a summer program at Harvard. The it actually did oral exams, where you had to answer questions, verbally. Um, so, like, there's definitely, like, a pushback against this, right? I think we should recognize. Um, but I mean, honestly, the AI is, to avoid it all costs. I mean, I use it for, for my job. If I need something explained to me quickly, or write a math question, and what would be a reasonable wrong answer, that kind of stuff. And so being able to use it for, like, gathering information, um, offering ideas, like AI can also be, can be uh, that an editor, but I would always want to have a human involvement in that, and not just assume just because ChatGPT said it, then therefore it must be true in all consequences, or in all contexts. And one other thing about it is that, you also can ask the AI, like, what did you get wrong, which is sort of a fascinating. Okay, okay, you gave me this thing. What information is incorrect? Because it'll actually correct itself sometimes. Um, so like, students will be using it in some regard, but I think a lot of students are also really paranoid to be accused of cheating this. And I attended a webinar, that Adobe had put out about AI in the classroom, and was saying that a lot of students are intentionally leaving in some grammatical mistakes or spelling errors so that it will feel real, um, to their professors. They were talking to college age students, and, like, and think that's sort of dreadful as well, right? That someone's not writing as well as they could because they're worried that they might sound too artificial. But there's, like, this analogy of it. There you go. That like, calculators are also, like, as an AI tool, right? And we can force students to write down all the math and do long division the hard way. But if you're like the SAT, which is like, hey, you know what, graph calculators are awesome. Let's just put it in the test, right? So that there's definitely two ways of looking at this, and I don't think that it's all or nothing with AI, and it certainly should not be all there, because like, um, writing is, like, it's fundamental for, like, for doing well, and being able to communicate, clearly, and then, like, understanding that, like, being able to communicate effectively, allows, like, open a larger world of job opportunities, like, things that are involved, like, you know comfy office jobs, or at home jobs, where, like, that it is usually, it's the production of writing is going to be a large part of that. And then also, like, for like a non-economic reason, is that it's the opportunity for students to give a voice to themselves, and affect the world, right? And even if they choose to express their ideas in a video essay or something, that's still writing at its core, right? It's not, very few are going to be able to improvise on that. All right, so let's get into, like, what writing could be, right? So writing should have purpose, and prose writing. We're not going to do a whole section on poetry today. There's basically only a few things you can do, right? You can tell a story. That could be fictional. It could be a personal biography, memoir. You can explain something, like how something works, or like what it does, or give instruction, or you can offer an opinion, right? So it's argument rhetoric, try to influence how someone thinks and believes. So, when you're getting into like the process of writing, it's good to have brainstorming, and getting things down, and preserving those ideas, right? And there's not like one right or wrong way to do this. I think there's a lot of ways that that work for individual writers, and I think it's good to like know the different methods and try them, and then see where it works the best for individuals. So one of those ideas like is free writing is to just get stuff down. This can be done on paper, this can be done in a Word document, and the idea is just to like throw ideas on there. Um, it could be in sentences, or it could be like in phrases, or like in a bulleted list or something. The idea is just to sort of like document what you're thinking. And for certain students who feel that they have a lot of ideas that are maybe a little scattered, that this could be good to to document them, and then come back and start the process of revision, the process of organization. The other thing, another way is just to answer questions, right? Like, so the who, what, where, when, why, how, any of those kind of questions. You're like, okay, I, what is important? When did it happen? Why did it happen? Thinking about those, those can help someone who feels like they're not sure what to write about within that topic. Other questions you could answer. And then the next part of that is going to be sort of outlining, right? The good writing needs to have structure, and that will lead towards paragraphs, and having like a captivating introduction, a conclusion that either summarizes or offers like the next steps in there. And then so we go from those like sort of general ideas and then into some more of an outline things. And so there's a couple of different ways to kind of start organizing these things. And we'll talk about three of them today. Um, T-graphs, Venn diagrams, bubble maps. So T-graph is great for especially when you're doing a comparison. Um, and then here we have Mickey versus Donald. Um, and like you know every row is a comparison between the two of them, right? Obviously you can make this more you can have three things, right? It wouldn't really be a T anymore, but that's okay too. But the idea of like if you're trying to you set up so you always have a sort of a counter example for whatever the comparisons are. And then I forgot about this Venn diagram. I like that. The the Venn um we use this one year round, even though it's seasonal. The Venn diagram of like where's overlap of things, right? Like, well, how could something be seen as in two categories there? And then a bubble map is sort of like, or sometimes like idea web. There's like there's different topics for it, right? So you're creating lines between things that in order to show relationships with them. Uh, all of these are fine. Obviously, I think some of them work better for certain kinds of ideas, but I think it's good to to try different ways of organization. Besides just writing like a list of here's my first paragraph, here's my second paragraph. Especially for someone who's struggling to write at the beginning of there, I think that can be very helpful. Okay, so another important thing with writing is to have purpose, right? Every writing needs to have a goal in mind, right? And so for a narrative, like what should the reader take away from this? Like what feeling should they have, right? Should they learn a lesson? Should they feel empathy with the characters? Should they feel contempt for the characters? That's narratives don't have to be positive, right? Um, for analysis, like what should the reader learn? Like assuming that your reader does not know about this topic, like going what should be the end result of that? And then for an argument, what should the reader agree with at the end of it? If it's effective, like the reader should be like, oh, I agree with this point. And so trying to write with the like if there are things that are classics for a reason, and the three-pronged thesis is one of those classics. And so, a three-pronged thesis is basically they're saying your main idea and then throws in three examples. Um, uh, Individually, we can all help reduce microplastic pollution by purchasing reusable containers, supporting local agriculture, and making food at home. Obviously, this works good for persuasive essay. But what this does is that you can then your first paragraph would to be in order to be parallel would be talking about buying reusable containers and the benefit of that. And you could have a cost benefit, and then obviously um, the making sure that that it's not contributing to microplastics ending up everywhere. Supporting local agriculture and what does that mean, and then making food at home so you don't have a bunch of to go containers. And in that that I basically just set the slide ahead of time, but that gives you have your clear structure, right? So that sets up three small paragraphs, right? And then you can you're building a structure in that three prong on there. This is especially a good one where there's a limitation on the writing, like it's for a final exam or something, a um, AP exam, yeah, free response. This also works great. And I think like we talk about organization that prayer organization isn't like it's not intuitive. I think for a lot of writers, um, and once someone gets writing, I think it's easy for them to to continue writing and then not think about okay, this idea is concluding, and it's time to then move on to another idea, right? Um, and I think for those who that are working with students in terms of in editing capacity, a really great feedback is to look at we have a page of text and just to tell them okay, so um, I think this could be two paragraphs. Where would you put the split? Um, and then and have them make that choice because I think that helps them to see the differences in ideas on that. And then a great thing to do is use transitions, right? I think that you know I've certainly read a lot of or passages from students who are developing writers, and they make a lot of assumptions that the um, the reader thinks like they think, and sometimes this will be to me being a bit confused at like in that point, like okay, why did we go from this thing to that thing? And so like almost all that can be fixed with just effective use of transitions, especially amongst paragraphs. Um, and I think it's important to kind of think of these ideas where like it links things, and also like if you have statement one, statement two, you put but in between them. Statement two is more important, right? And so like there's a sort of natural progression in that. That also allows you to say the the idea that is like that you disagree with or think is not the right solution, and then transition into what so it also ends with um, you know the better option. Um, a bunch of transitions here. I wouldn't write all these down right now, but there's like there's a great way to increase vocabulary, right? Um, in there of seeing like not just not relying on because and however in there. And then I think one of the things that's where this can be most difficult for someone who's building their writing is the importance of revision. Um, that very few people can just have where they you know the first draft is the best draft and then they move on. And even if someone who is that way, I would almost guarantee that they started with needing a lot of revision, and it's much like a professional athlete or something. It's like it looks easy because they've had that practice. Um, so the you know focus on what needs fixing, right? And or like focus on a specific element. So it can get if you are a person who is providing feedback, one of the worst things you can do is just overwhelm them with like every little minutia of things. Like it's like, well, this is a comma splice, and then you know there's a parallel, there's some parallel issue in this sense later. And this is like you're kind of using a regular verb tense, and maybe all those things are true, but if that's every sentence, right? Um, the feedback from the writer is just like, okay, I'm doing everything wrong. Um, and I remember writing for an academic article, this was many years ago, and the the editor, who was all like was a friend of mine, like basically rewrote every word I wrote, and like it was just like, what, why, buddy? Like, it was such intense editing, and I think it was really just that, his preference for what he thought was right versus like my own writing style that was um, like inexperience on his end. But like, okay, what is a specific topic to focus on? Because like, no one's going to go from like struggling with writing to then to have a perfect passage in one revision, right? Like it's gonna be process on it. And I think it's also, providing beneficial feedback. Sharing writing is makes people nervous. I get that. I think I've at this point in my life have crossed over that like worry about it. You've written enough practice tests and articles and stuff. Um, but like you assume that like assume the worst when you submit your writing on there. And I think also like it's just important that assume good intent with the writer. Because like I'll be honest, I'm a sloppy writer. I tend to I type sloppily, and I tend to kind of revise as I'm typing. So sometimes we're like just basically I change the sentence and like, oh, I kind of broke something. Um, like this is I'm acknowledging my limit, like my weakness, right? But I don't need an editor to be like, oh, like why would you like, this is the wrong form of its or whatever. It's like, I mean, I know the difference. I was thinking about other parts of the writing, and like understanding that like assume good intent, right? That like do not punish someone for making a grammatical mistake. Um, and like what were they intending, right? Versus like getting mad at them like, oh, I don't understand like what you're writing. um and like for giving feedback, this is it, if you want to think like how to structure feedback, think about it like as like sort of a twofold thing, and Amelia, our writing guy, kind of emphasizes this. So you have like a higher order skill. So this is like an important like big picture thing, right? So it might be like the main idea or the thesis, might be like having effective evidence, might be having a logical organization, right? So like, that's a big skill. And then you can also get throw in like a lower order skill, and like this might be punctuation or proper boundaries on clauses, and or avoiding run-on sentences, or effective diction, like using the and not relying on the same words, or anything like that, right? Um, making using focusing on parallelism or misplaced modifiers. So there's different ways you can look at it. And so we have it's a little cartoon here. This I think is a good one there. Obviously, this is talking about drawing. But how do you do well? Practice. Must be an innate gift, a gift from God. It's practice. I never said that. Some people are so telling mystery. Practice, right? And I think this is true for a lot of things, right? Of the whether it's drawing or writing or playing a musical instrument or playing a sport, right? There is a lot of it's practice, and trying to improve on that. And so we want to make sure we promote growth as a writer. Um, like some people are really intuitive about writing, but most are not. And it takes time to improve that skill. And if you do well, you're also giving someone a voice, right? Like you're helping them organize their ideas better, and then share them with others. And so like thinking about we're getting kind of the executive function study skills side of this, but um there's like a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset says I'm bad at something and I want to not improve, but a growth mindset is like, okay, I can do better, right? And like especially in academics, we want to in always lean on a growth mindset, right? And not just say that, okay, I'm not good at that. um and especially in writing, like don't listen. Oh, I suck at writing. I'm, I'm so bad at bad handwriting. I always misspell words. Whatever excuses someone makes, that's not going to be like we need to push through that, right? And that mindset actually affects neuroplasticity and all these big words and stuff, um, because it's just like if you have a growth mindset, you're like okay, like you look at it as there's now a problem to overcome versus a barrier, right? And so a fixed mindset is going to have all the uh, like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like okay, if you're bad, if you say you're bad at something, you are. Um, and that's saying that explicitly is that you know the saying it and believing it is makes it true, right? But conversely, if you have a growth mindset, which is the same scenario, um, you'll likely get better, right? Because you haven't sort of settled for like that negative emotion. And so to growth of the writer, I think there's three R's on there. Um, if we ignore a W or two. So we read, write, and revise. And I think that revise is one of the keys on there, right? So if you want to get better at writing, like reading is important. Like read, like in just if you want to get better at sports, you would watch sports. And if you wanted to get better at playing guitar, you'd probably listen to music, right? Whatever whatever it is that you're trying to improve on, like actually diving into that form um, will make you better because you're getting exposure to it. And in reading, you're seeing other ways that writers are composing this, and you might also learn things like, wow, I really like how this author tells a story, or how this author explains the news, right? Different different ways of looking at things, and that can help a reader to kind of develop their own style like that is like in conversation with them. So obviously it shouldn't be taken whole cloth, but I don't think that's the worry at this moment. And part of this can get into like close reading or active reading, um, and like thinking about like um, what the author did. And so yeah, I would have said years ago, like, oh, like that, someone wrote this, but actually now, like on the internet, I can't actually say that because there's a lot of articles that no one wrote this. It was just aggregated by SEO to hopes of getting a certain number of clicks, right? That's that's unfortunate, but that's obviously the world we live in there. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, like someone wrote, but if we narrow our scope to human-based writing, this job gets weirder and weirder the more years I do it. Um, why did the author write the text? Like, like what was the purpose of this, right? Were they trying to convince me of something? You know, what is this one section or probably a paragraph? Like what was the point of this, right? Like what are the key details I should know by the end of it? Um, where there are parts that are hard to follow. And what would be the next if there would be the next chapter if this was a book, right? And those kind of like these are questions are thinking about the higher order of concerns of writing, and thinking about like the actual structure of things. These are also good, for all kinds of other stuff. It's good for AP exams. It's good for like the SAT asks questions like, what's the purpose of this text? And they're very abstract, but this is the kind of thinking you need for it. And I think it's good to like just as if you're trying to train for a sport, you obviously would play the sport, but you're probably going to do activities that are adjacent to the sport. Maybe that's just going to the gym. um Maybe that's they like the parallel that like a football player can really benefit from dance training because it's about foot placement and movement and being quick. And so there's a sort of like the offensive line of some team like taking ballet instruction or something, which sounds really kind of off topic, but it's about like balance, about movement, right? Even though the actual implementation of that is completely different. And so I think that we can also apply this to writing of like there's different avenues for that, right? Um, and so one thing it would be good if like if someone really focused on like the idea of morning pages. So like in the morning, like just get some ideas down, right? This can be done in a journal. This can be done to create a um, uh, short story writing. The ideas that pop in your head. Like the point is that you get to normalize writing. And then this idea of like uh, that if like this idea of a tweet. So the if, pre-X Twitter thing, there was a limitation on how much you could write. And so can you summarize something by just um, by a few words, right? Because I think if you're able to like sort of uh, use like a limited like a set of characters to summarize something, you have to think like what's important, and I think that's a really beneficial skill. And it doesn't have to be just reading; it could be talk about your movie, could talk about like the game last night, or a video game you're playing or whatever, right? I think we don't need to um, limit to to just reading. And there's like actually I was like, hey, there's a can you write a story on this, right? Um, so um, take an image, right, and then like tell a story. I mean, obviously, there's different directions that this could go. It could be something playful, it could be something sinister. Who knows? But doing that is like to build characters, right? And obviously, we have limited information here, but um, you know, what is that boy thinking? And try to try to build a story on there. All right, so there's also there's like this idea of just prompts. So there's a lot of classic prompts if you and honestly, like going back to AI, if like ChatGPT can give you endless prompts to respond to, right? Like there was ethical uses of this, and like hey, I want to write about something. Can you give me a topic? Yeah, sure, that's a good use of AI, right? And so they sort of like open-ended questions, right, that make you think about a topic. Those can be beneficial uh, to uh, to interjecting those. Got a few more here. I know it could also be like a like here we have some idioms, some figures of speech. Um, would you agree, disagree? And we have it down here saying that like for high school students, it's probably get a little bit beyond. You would hope they could get beyond the like binary thinking, so it's just not just yes no. But like is it conditional? Like actually a lot of than words, but is that always true? Do you think of like a counterexample, or someone who believes that yes, actually people are words and you don't? How would you persuade them, right? What would they be emphasizing versus what you would emphasize? Which is sort of expanded in this slide here. All good things come to his weight, but that is context. It's not always true. That in baking cake, that makes sense. But like if you're running a race, obviously, don't if you would well, just can wait. So I guess you could say that you have to wait for the ref to say go. Um, and another exercise would be to explain how to do something like that. I find this actually something that people really struggle with, in terms of like give steps. Um, it's good to be able to write, like be able to write forward, like straightforward with like an implied subject, where it's like set oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And this makes you think about the process of something, right? And what works going to work best is something that well, right? So maybe it's restoring a guitar, right? Or how to properly catch a football or something, right? Like so this you'd want to have it be something that makes sense to that student, or how do you solve this puzzle in the Zelda game or something. Um, but like this is a good way to to have like to show skill in another area and then apply it into reading there or into writing, excuse me. And then revision is really key to doing this well. Um, so the like going back and looking at writing, and I think that this also can be done for something that was written a little while ago. How would you change it? Like, how would you improve upon it on there? And then getting feedback on revisions, like having someone read it the first time and then having read it the second time. I think a good teacher slash editor will be able to see the differences in that, and then provide strong feedback. And then the kind of the last advice here is, like, when all things fail, keep writing. Um, the like this should be a lifelong process, and I think that's a good thing, right? That obviously you want to get to a certain level of proficiency to, like, express your ideas and have a job, and be able to, uh, write a resume and an email and stuff. But like, we should always be getting better at these kind of things. All right. So if like, we do writing tutoring, we have a lot of different kind of programs. This we, in fact, I'll show you. We have even a little, like, oh, it does, my background doesn't like that. Let's see, there we go. We have a writing guide that comes with tutoring on there. Um, on there. So we got a QR code. You can, it sends a Calendly link. Um, I was beta testing this on the last time there, but if you have an iPhone, it's working great. If you have an Android, for me, on my Android phone, it just, a copy and paste it. You have to just put it in the browser. Sorry about that. I don't know maybe that's just a me problem, but feel free to do that. And we should be launching a poll here soon on this. Poll time. Poll. Yeah, polls up. Thank you, Applerouth Tech. All right, so if you want to look at that, and answer that, then that would be great. Um, I see that someone asked earlier if this will be shared, and the answer is yes. What we'll do is we'll wait for the computers to do their weird little compression thing, and then we can send out the slides and the video tomorrow on there. But um, I appreciate everyone for attending, and we got this one done quick. So hope everyone has a good night. I'll catch you later.